Vietnam is a place where Buddhism, communism, and capitalism coexist in the same frame. And it's also one of the world's major honey exporters. We travel from Vietnam's north to south, then continue into Cambodia, testing honey along the way for enzyme activity with the active honey test. Along the journey, we also find wild honey, the kind bees build in combs directly on tree branches, and compare it with honey from managed hives. Wild bees versus managed bees. Which honey is more bioactive? What do you think? And we reach an unexpected conclusion. Vietnamese honey can be raw and bioactive at the source, but by the time it reaches the US or Europe, it may arrive dead. Why does this happen? And who's responsible? Watch the video. Central Hanoi greeted us with endless motorbikes and no habit of letting pedestrians pass. It took us a few days to get used to crossing the street the local way. In the city center, there's no empty space. Every building is a cafe, a shop, or a small restaurant. The next day, we went to see Train Street. A train passes directly through a narrow street that has turned into one long restaurant, with tourist prices. Ho Chi Minh's mausoleum stands right next to an old Buddhist temple. Water Puppet Theater once entertained the Emperor of Vietnam, and today anyone can experience these ancient traditions. The show is performed on a water stage, with puppeteers hidden behind a screen, controlling the figures with long rods. Like in other countries, Vietnamese people usually buy honey in supermarkets, so our first stop for honey is a city supermarket. The selection of honey is huge. I looked for something more expensive, hoping to buy raw, bioactive honey. In the evening, we stopped for a quick meal at a local noodle soup place. Pho bo is the most popular soup in Vietnam. That's where I decided to prepare a honey solution. For the test, I need 1 spoon of honey and about 60 milliliters of clean water. I dissolve the honey completely in the water and leave it overnight. During that time, the bee enzymes in the honey begin to work. Vietnam is considered one of the safest countries in Asia, so in the evening you can enjoy a walk by the lake. It's a nice pause in the story before we return to the honey test results. Morning in Hanoi. Time to run the test. Unfortunately, there was no miracle. The test strip didn't change color, which means the bee enzymes in this honey are inactive. This result doesn't prove it's fake honey, but it does show it's not bioactive. Now, it's time to explain what exactly we are measuring in honey. Honey is mostly glucose and fructose, with a bit of other sugars and about 20% water, so on paper it doesn't look very different from corn syrup. What makes honey unique is the enzymes bees add while turning nectar into honey. When honey is diluted with water, one of these enzymes, glucose oxidase, switches on and converts glucose into hydrogen peroxide. This reaction is what gives honey its functional value and much of its antibacterial effect. High heat deactivates these enzymes, strips honey of its bioactive properties, and turns it into just another sweetener. This enzyme reaction is the basis of the active honey test, specially developed for home use. If the enzymes are active, the reagent shifts from white to blue, a clear sign the honey is raw and bioactive. I visited Hanoi's biggest food market, hoping to find bioactive honey there. The market was extremely lively, with a huge selection of fruit, meat, fish, and other foods. To my surprise, I didn't see much honey at all among the stalls. Only one vendor offered me a 1-liter bottle of honey for $2. Even by Vietnamese standards, that was very cheap. 1 spoon of honey, a little water, mix it well, and leave it at room temperature for 9 hours. The honey looked very runny, again. Its moisture content was 23.5%, far above the expected 18%. This one brought no surprises either. The strip stayed blank, 0 enzyme activity. When our driver learned that I analyze honey, he asked me to check his. He gets it from relatives in a remote mountain village, and he wanted to know whether it still retains its bioactive properties. I took this honey with me on a 2-day cruise in Ha Long Bay, one of the most romantic places in Vietnam. We were welcomed on board the yacht. Then we sailed out into the bay and got into small rowing boats that can take you right up close to those cliffs. Night on the bay feels completely different. Quiet, dark water, and boat lights reflecting on the surface. Now, let's examine the honey our driver gave me. I mix a spoon of honey and water and leave it overnight. At sunrise, I checked the solution for bee enzyme activity. The test revealed very high enzyme activity. This is a real natural remedy. The honey still looked very runny. Its moisture content was 25%. This was a surprising contrast. Strong bioactivity, but very high moisture. High moisture makes honey unstable and more likely to ferment. So, even when the honey is truly alive, it can still be difficult to store without changing it. In the tropics, that's a key problem producers have to solve. The main takeaway is simple. Vietnam's warm, humid climate often means honey has high moisture. To keep it from fermenting, producers pasteurize it. Unfortunately, heat destroys the enzymes and the honey becomes dead. To explore central Vietnam, we stayed in Da Nang. Da Nang is a modern coastal city with a wide beach, a long seafront, and several bridges over the water. The most famous is the Dragon Bridge, which breathes fire and water on weekends. The Marble Mountains are nearby, and that's where we'll begin. A steep staircase leads up to terraces with sculptures and temples. In the many caves, you'll find Buddha statues. The climb is short but intense, and every level opens a new viewpoint. The contrast between bright sun outside and the calm, shadowy interiors make it feel like a natural sanctuary. Historic sites are the perfect setup for photos. People come here not only to learn history, but to capture a moment inside it. We continue to Hoi An, a small historic seaside town famous for its well-preserved old quarter, yellow houses, narrow streets, and merchant halls. When we arrived in Hoi An, we stopped for a snack, what our guide called the most delicious sandwich in the world. This place became famous after a visit from Anthony Bourdain, an American chef, author, and TV host who became well known through his books and travel shows about food and people. In the Middle Ages, the town served as Vietnam's maritime gateway. At that time, Vietnam traded actively with China, which is why the city has many buildings used as meeting halls for Chinese communities. The architecture is a visible reminder that commerce shaped this town for centuries. It was already dark, and we decided to take a boat ride on the river and release small paper boats with lit candles. The river is calm at night, and the lantern light makes everything feel more romantic. Lantern stalls line the sidewalks, and the different colors reflect on wet pavement after the rain. After the negative experience in Hanoi, in Da Nang, I decided to look for specialized shops that sell raw honey. I found one store, messaged the manager, and they told me it was the only place in town to get truly unprocessed honey. Today, we're going to test that claim. The selection of honey was surprisingly large, with many different floral origins. Every jar claimed it was 100% natural. I picked 2 samples, coffee blossom honey and a polyfloral honey. And to my delight, I also found honeycomb. After the Dragon Bridge show, we walked to the riverside to prepare a honey and water solution. The advantage of the honey active test is that it's simple and designed for home use. Little honey and clean water. That's all you need to run the test. In the morning, I went down to the seashore to run the test. All 3 samples showed active bee enzymes, and the comb honey showed very high activity. Amazing! Comb honey is often the least processed, so it can preserve enzyme activity better than filtered, heated honey. Key takeaways. Local honey tastes very different from what people in Europe and the US are used to. It's more fruity because bees forage on plants like longan, lychee, hevea, and coffee. The moisture is high, and the honey often foams. The good news is that in specialized shops, you can still find truly bioactive honey. Our next stop is southern Vietnam. At Saigon Airport, we're greeted by huge Soviet-style posters, even though the city itself doesn't look Soviet at all. There's a chain of organic food stores in the city. That's where I found a large selection of Vietnamese honey. I chose 2 samples, comb honey and a jar labeled ripe honey from the blossoms of old longan trees. I prepared a honey solution for analysis. 1 spoon of honey dissolved in 60 milliliters of clean water. I measured the moisture content of the honey. The comb honey was 21.5%, and the jar honey was 18.5%. The lower moisture in the jar makes me think the honey may have been dried, possibly by heating. we'll leave our solutions until the evening and give the bee enzymes time to do their work. Saigon, officially Ho Chi Minh City, is Vietnam's largest city. A mix of a French colonial center with wide boulevards and skyscrapers, endless streams of motorbikes, and street food everywhere. Right on the street, they'll press fresh sugarcane juice for you. With ice and a squeeze of lime, it's delicious. In the evening, it's time to check the bioactivity of our honey samples. Multifloral comb honey and jarred longan blossom honey. The comb honey showed high bee enzyme activity, meaning it still retains its beneficial properties, while the jar honey showed a complete 0. It may still be natural honey, but in terms of beneficial activity, it's no different from corn syrup. Our next stop is the Mekong Delta, a network of branches, canals, and small islands where the river splits into a watery labyrinth before reaching the sea. Along the riverbanks, you see coconut palms, old brick kilns, and small processing workshops. We watched how the white coconut flesh is shredded, then slowly simmered with sugarcane juice. Add nuts and dried fruit, and it turns into homemade sweets. We sampled local infusions with banana leaves, cobras, and scorpions. We were treated to local fruits and tea with honey. Did someone say honey? Right there on the spot, we found 3 beehives. I wanted to take comb for analysis, but the beekeeper wasn't there, so. The honey I bought from this farm showed 0 enzyme activity. High moisture forces local beekeepers to pasteurize honey to prevent it from spoiling. This heating doesn't change the taste, but unfortunately it makes the honey useless for health. Active Honey Test allows consumers to test honey at home without laboratories. Walking Street is the noisiest tourist street in Saigon, packed with bars, loud music, street food, and crowds until late at night. And the next day, we fly to Cambodia. The adventure continues. By tuk-tuk, we head to Angkor Wat, Cambodia's most famous temple complex and a symbol of the Khmer Empire. It's a vast stone temple city with towering spires and endless bas-reliefs carved with myths, processions, and scenes of everyday life. Angkor Wat was originally dedicated to Vishnu, and his statue once stood at the highest point of the temple, a place reserved for the emperor alone. Today, it's also a favorite backdrop for family photos. The walls are covered with bas-reliefs, and everywhere you look you see apsaras, celestial dancers, carved with elegant poses, high hairstyles, and layers of jewelry. Inside, we step into a quiet courtyard with a long rectangular pool in the center, framed by stone steps and a shaded colonnade running all the way around. The central sanctuary was once reserved for the emperor and his closest circle. You reach it by climbing a steep staircase, and we went all the way up. At the top, there are stone basins for ritual washing before prayer. They once held water, but today they're dry. Inside the sanctuary stands a Buddha statue. Next, we head to another temple, famous to many as a filming location for Lara Croft. Giant strangler fig trees drop aerial roots that wrap around the temple walls. The jungle is reclaiming the stone, roots sliding into every crack. The whole place feels like a living sculpture. Do you see those clumps on the branches? That's wild honey. Bees build broad sheets of comb right on the tree. No hives, no frames, no human help. The honey sits inside those combs, hanging out in the open air. Historical motifs live on in modern culture through dance. In the evening, we watched an Apsara dance show. It was Anastasia's birthday, and the group surprised her with a song and a small cake. In town, I found a small shop. The owner told me this honey comes straight from local apiaries and hasn't been processed. In the shop, I found dozens of honey varieties from different regions of Cambodia. A lot of comb honey was kept in the refrigerator. Keeping comb honey chilled can help avoid fermentation, especially in a hot, humid climate. It also hints that moisture may be a real issue here too. Now it's worth testing a few samples and comparing the results. I selected 4 jarred honeys with different botanical origins. I also chose 2 comb honeys, one dark and one light. The seller couldn't name the botanical origin of the comb honey, but it was obvious they came from different plants. In the evening, I dissolve 1 spoon of honey in 60 milliliters of water and leave it overnight at room temperature. In the morning, I'll check enzyme activity. In the evening, we head to Pub Street, the town's most famous nightlife street, packed with restaurants and tourists. Morning came and I measured enzyme activity. 3 out of the 4 samples showed active enzymes. Jarred honey often loses activity during processing, so getting 3 active samples is a strong sign. Now, what about the comb honey? Both samples showed very high enzyme activity. This is exactly what we hope to see from comb honey. It suggests minimal processing and strong natural bioactivity. Let's check the moisture content of the honey samples. In Southeast Asia, honey often has more than 18% moisture because of the warm, humid climate. In the morning, we head to Cambodia's largest lake. Just like 1,000 years ago, fishermen live there in floating houses, and along the shore they build homes on huge stilts, because in the rainy season the water level rises by several meters. Suddenly, the driver stopped at a roadside stall. We got out of the car. This was pure luck. Wild honey, cut from trees in the nearby mountains just the day before. This honey has never been heated or processed. Wild bees attach these combs directly to tree branches. I chose the lightest honey and the darkest one. It felt like a real stroke of luck. Halfway to the lake, we made another stop to try rice baked in bamboo. They add shredded coconut and green beans, pack it into a hollow bamboo tube, and roast it over charcoal. It turns into a tasty snack. In the small town we arrived in, school had just ended. Students came out onto the street, looked at us with curiosity, and kept saying, "Hello, hello." We got into a motorboat and headed out onto the water. Life in this village is completely tied to the lake. Local transport is only by motorboat. Floating houses are home not only to fishermen, but also to their families, with children and even domestic animals. Kids are taken to school on the shore by motorboat. Drinking water is delivered here in large bottles, and electricity comes from solar panels. The main source of food is fish. On the shore, it's smoked and sold cheaply. On the way to the lake, I bought 2 samples of wild honey, 1 light and 1 dark. I prepared the honey solution, 1 spoon of honey mixed with 60 milliliters of water. Then I measured the moisture content. The light sample was 23% and the dark one was 23.5%. I left the solution in a dark place. Even though I know testing supermarket honey can feel like a waste of time, I went to Angkor Market and bought honey there anyway. I chose the most expensive one, labeled raw and unfiltered. In the evening, I ran the test. Wild honey is made with 0 human involvement. Wild bees build open comb high on tree branches in the forest, and the honey forms right there, in the open air. Both wild samples came back with very high bee enzyme activity. Then I tested the supermarket jar labeled raw and unfiltered. Unfortunately, it came back at 0. There are many ways humans can ruin honey, but there's no way to make it better. While we're enjoying Cambodian barbecue, let's sum it up. Bees do what they're meant to do. When they turn nectar into honey, they add enzymes, and that's what gives honey its antibacterial power. Every comb honey sample we tested on this trip showed very high enzyme activity. Wild honey and apiary comb were just as strong. But in this warm, humid climate, honey often has too much moisture. To keep it from fermenting, producers pasteurize it. Heat kills the enzymes, and the honey becomes dead. The word isn't scientific, but the meaning is simple. Honey goes from a natural remedy to a sweet syrup with no functional value. Active Honey Test is designed for home use. It reliably shows whether honey still has active enzymes.